Informed, not inflamed. Healthcare.
Scary fact, a U.S. military vet commits suicide every 65 minutes. That's because of PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. We will speak to an author who has the solution for America, along with ways you can help. Hi, everyone. John Daly here with Informed, Not Inflamed. Too often we say, I really want to help, but I don't know how. Well, we have some answers for you. My guest is Jaime Parent. He is the author of the new book, Moving Past PTSD, Consciousness, Understanding, and Appreciation of Military Veterans and Their Families. And it is loaded with well-researched solutions. Jaime, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John.
Well, it's good to have you. And for the record, people need to know, Jaime, you and I went to junior high and high school together back in West Hartford, Connecticut. We've been friends, I think, since we've been 12 years old. And I might have had you on the show just for that reason, but this issue really does touch me. I have done a number of events over the years with Hope for the Warriors, and my wife Terry and I have met and become friends with a number of vets, especially of recent wars. So with that disclaimer out of the way, Jaime, give folks a brief rundown of your military career, and then we'll get into why you wrote the book.
Well, thank you, John. I joined the military in 1983 and spent 20 years in the Air Force in a variety of jobs. I was a laboratory director, and then I became a chief information officer right around the time when electronic medical records started to become popular. The first 10 years, I was a lab officer at places like March Air Force Base in California, Texas, and England. And while I was at March Air Force Base, I was exposed to the early generation of the electronic medical record that the Veterans Administration was rolling out. And with this experience, I began to just pursue other types of opportunities, technology opportunities within the Air Force. And by the end of my career, I wound up at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, where I was a chief information officer for TRICARE, which is the medical health maintenance program, HMO. I retired, as I said, after 20 years, and then I began my career in the civilian world as a chief information officer, and I moved from University of Maryland to Rush University Medical Center. And at Rush, that's where I got exposed to a lot of veterans issues, and I built my own healthcare IT training career programs for veterans, a fast-track program, which is included in the book. And that's kind of my history in a nutshell. I've been helping veterans for quite some time, and I thought I'd go beyond the scope a little bit and go beyond Chicagoland and see if I could put this in a book and help veterans across the United States.
All right. So what came to you that said, I need to write this book?
Rush began this program called the Road Home Program. It was connected with Wounded Warriors. And their mission was to help the clinical side of PTSD, not only veterans, but also their families. One day I spoke to the chief psychiatrist of the program. His name is Mark Pollock. And I said, Mark, what do you think about adding vocational stuff to what you're doing? And he said, it sounds like a really good idea, but Jaime, our scope with Wounded Warriors really focusing on the clinical side and being kind of ancillary to the VA, not competing with them, but we're focusing on clinical issues. So I think the vocational side is great. If you want to pursue that on your own, that would be fantastic. So this was in October 2013, and so I thought, okay, let me see what I can think about in terms of helping veterans get jobs. So the book really started with a vocational approach to veterans. How can I get veterans fast-tracked into a lucrative career, not just a job, but a career that they can continue to serve, and see what I could do to put something together to get veterans into the workplace. And the program actually worked very well. We started off small, and we were still pretty much on a small scale. But as I continued to know veterans more on a more interesting and complicated scale, and as I continued to do interviews, I realized that despite the fact that I'm a retired lieutenant colonel and a veteran myself, I really didn't know what was going on with veterans with PTSD and the impact that it had on their families and everybody around them. So I kind of shift gears a little bit from a topic or a book that would talk about jobs to really getting behind the nitty-gritty of what is really going on with military veterans transitioning back to the civilian sector. Why are there 20 plus suicides per day for military veterans? Why are they killing themselves in the VA parking lot? Why do they go back so many times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different times, go back to the war zone? And what are we really doing wrong, and what can I learn from these veterans doing some very, very personal and very emotional interviews, not just with veterans themselves, but also with Gold Star moms. Those are moms that are mothers of military personnel that have died overseas. And I just started really getting more into the topic, and I realized that there's just not a whole lot of right information out there. And I thought I would just write a book to fill in some of those gaps, to answer some of those initial questions that I had, and to really share what I had learned that perhaps people don't get from the regular media or from just talking with veterans themselves. And these powerful interviews are really what make the book what it is.
Wow. In reading the book, what was amazing to me was that before this, there's no real clearinghouse to explain exactly what PTSD is and what the solutions could be. And you would think, since we've been dealing with this for so long, that there would be more.
Well, the brain is really kind of the last frontier of modern medicine. I mean, we have such great technology that can reduce the death rate or help to cure some cancers or really work a lot on some of the other physical ailments of the body, but the brain is still really quite a mystery. And in something like PTSD, unfortunately, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, is that military people have been coming home broken ever since
Mhm.
World War One and
Yeah.
beyond. I start with World War One because at World War One we started talking about things like combat fatigue, shell shock, combat stress. And these are just old legacy terms for what we now call PTSD, or another term called invisible wounds of war. These conditions have been going on for quite some time. And in my book, the research I did, I found that we've been making the same mistakes in terms of military veterans transitioning home. We've been doing the same thing over and over again, and the problems that military veterans face today are the same ones that the so-called doughboys from World War One faced 100 years ago, and that is access to medical care, inadequate housing, availability of college classes, college seats. And the mistake we keep making, John, is that the fact that we always think we go into these wars with minimal casualties, but the people that come back, especially something like today's war on terror, I mean, this war has been going on for 20 plus years and no sign of ending. And we just creating a population of people that need these services, and yet we still don't have the infrastructure there to support them. So even
A
though
couple.
it would be nice to have such a clearinghouse, the VA does the best they can, but they are quite overwhelmed, and they would be the closest thing to a clearinghouse that we have in order to really help veterans get back on their feet and do well in the civilian transition.
It's interesting because you hit on a couple of things there. First being that, if I go back to my, I was a literature major, and I can remember Hemingway in the 20s, and he wrote about a lot of the guys who came back from World War One, who were just kind of out of it in the 1920s, and certainly had a lot of problems. And I think what you're saying is that whether it's World War One, World War Two, Korean War, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, it's really all the same, right?
It really is, and a lot of people have that relative. They have the dad
Hmm.
or the uncle, or in some cases, the aunt or the mom
Hmm.
that have come back from the war zone, and they're different people. And a lot of them really don't want to talk about what happened to them. And going back to the greatest generation, World War II, a lot of men and women came back, and they don't want to talk about the war. I had this
Hmm.
interesting talk with a family member who her dad came back from World War II, and he never talked about the war. She would try to ask him, and he would just say, "No, I don't want to talk about it." No. Yet when she would go in his case in his room, he had like Purple Heart, he had this Legion of Valor, he had all these medals. And she wanted to know, "Hey, Dad, how did you get this medal?" And he would never say, "No, no,
Hmm.
no, I don't really want to talk about it." Well, one day the dad died, and a couple of his war buddies came to the funeral. And so she started talking to them, and they told her, "Yeah, your dad was a war hero. He went into this burning building. He got people out. He went and saved people from the battlefield, and he did all this kind of stuff." And she was really overwhelmed with this information. She had no idea that this was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And she came to me and she said, Jamie, I'm kind of angry at my dad. I'm mad that this happened. And I said, her name was Kristen, and I said, Kristen, don't be mad. I said, your dad just couldn't talk about these things, and he didn't have a way of articulating it to you, and there's no way you could have understood the horror
Mm-hmm.
of what he went through. And she said, the veterans at the funeral said the same exact thing. They said, don't be mad at your dad because he went through these things and he couldn't share with them. It's not that he didn't love you or didn't want to share them with you. He just couldn't. And she said to me, the veterans told me the same thing. And I said, yeah, exactly. I said, and just be grateful that you did find out the truth. It doesn't matter whether he was alive or not. Your
Mm-hmm.
father was a war hero, and he was a great man. And it's good that you got the opportunity to hear exactly what he did and how he served his country. And so she felt a lot better about that after I had reaffirmed what the veterans already told her.
And it's fascinating you bring that up. It reminded me of a story I did when I was in Providence, Rhode Island. I was at WPRI, and it was 1985, and they asked me to do the 10-year anniversary of the Vietnam War. And I said, well, okay, sure, more than happy to do it. I didn't serve in the war. And so they said, no, but we want you to do it. And I found a great article, I believe it was Esquire magazine, and it was about the troops who had come back. And it's people who were back living relatively normal lives, but it still affected them. And it affected them in the ways, just what you're saying, that, they didn't want to tell their family. They didn't want to talk about it. Yet at the same time, too, and I had a couple of guys verify this. And these guys were like, business people running their own business. They would do anything to be back over there fighting arm in arm with their buddies.
Oh, yeah.
That was something to them that just meant so much. That camaraderie, that watching out for the other guy, was such a big thing. And when you kind of understand that, then you kind of go, okay, all right, I get that. On the other hand, I just interviewed a gentleman by the name of Andy Bida. And Andy's about our age. His dad's like 95 years old, and he was in Anders' army in World War II. So in Poland, they literally escaped the Nazis and then had to escape the Soviets. And Anders created this army of Polish, not only refugees but also soldiers, and they literally went and fought and freed most of Europe, especially even down in Italy. Andy got the word finally out of his dad, who was like in his 80s at the time, and he finally talked about all they had done. Andy wrote a book, a great book on it, and now they've just come back from Poland where they got honored over there. And the father at 95, I'm sure he had some form of PTSD younger, but he seems to have gotten over it. So do you get over the PTSD? Is that something that can happen, or is it just something that's going to stick with you the rest of your life?
Well, the clinicians, the doctors and nurses and psychiatrists will tell you that PTSD is kind of a lifelong condition, and the best you can do is treat it. There is some thought, though, that might be changing as new techniques come into play and new therapies help the military person with PTSD. Like a lot of people with a mental illness, it's kind of a combination of using therapies and medication. I have what I think will be a controversial chapter in my book entitled "You Cured My PTSD?" It's the story of a Marine named B, who her job was actually to deliver munitions to the front, going through various dangerous roads to get to the front to deliver ammunition. And B was also a sharpshooter in the Marines, one of the top sharpshooters that the Marines had. And B told me that her day consisted of driving up to the front, and she woke up every morning saying, "Okay, thank God I'm alive, number one. And number two, if I die today, I hope to, save 3 or 4 Marines in the process because I'm never going home."
Mm-hmm.
That was her thing. But she did come home, and she saw some bad things, and she had PTSD. Well, she came into our program, the Enabled Vet program, which there's a full appendix on how any organization can use this program to train veterans, but we can talk about that a little later. Anyhow, B would take the train to come to work at Rush for about a 2-hour ride, and 2 or 3 times a week she would get sick on the train. And just about every day she'd be looking on the train suspicious because she thought somebody was looking at her strange.
Mhm.
And she was like really nervous and scared of this person. That kind of gives you a picture of where Bee's head was at. And she came to Rush, and she did very well in our program. And to give you an example of kind of like where her head is at and where organizations can really help veterans with PTSD, Bee came running into my office one day and she said, Jamie, you'll never guess what. And I'm like, oh, well, what is it? She goes, I went to lunch with people. And I'm like, okay,
Wow.
B. So what's so big about that? She goes, no, you don't understand. She said, I went to lunch with people, and they asked what type of shows I like on Netflix. They asked where do I go shopping? What do I like to do in my spare time? And I said, well, B, that's kind of like the normal thing you get at lunch, right? And she goes, no, you don't understand. When I tell people I'm a Marine, the first thing they ask me is, hey, did you ever kill anybody?
Mhm.
Hey, what's it like to be a Marine with a bunch of other male jarheads? Did they try to grope you or anything like that? She said, I am so sick of those kinds of questions.
Mhm.
And these people treated me like B. They didn't treat me like a Marine. They treated me like I was a friend. And she said, I've never experienced anything like that. I've never had that kind of experience. And I thought, you know what? It's not just enough to offer a job for the veteran. You have to have the training of the employees that work with them so that they have this mindset of really understanding the veteran. The trigger points, yes, but also treating the veteran like a person first
Mhm.
and not somebody that went over to a war zone.
Wow.
And B was getting therapy from her doctor on a regular basis. And she came in one day and she said, you know what, Jamie, my meds are cut in half. I don't have to take this anymore. And you know what? When I came to work today, I missed my stop on the train. And I'm like, again, John, I'm learning as well.
Mhm.
This is new information for me. And I was like, okay, so B, what's so great about missing the train? I mean, she said, no, you don't understand. I was so relaxed on the train looking at my phone that I missed the stop. I wasn't on edge every minute of the train. I missed my stop. And I said, woohoo, I missed my stop. This is great. And so she says to me, she said, you know what, Jamie? This program cured my PTSD. And I'm like, whoa, B, come on. I mean, she said, no. My therapist said that this is curing my PTSD. I take half the meds I used to. I'm having fun. I'm making friends. I don't have the fear I had on the train. This has cured my PTSD. So, okay, great, B. That's great. And so I'm thinking,
Wow.
well, quite a stretch, right? So I went to one of the physicians at the Road Home program who actually treat, clinically veterans with PTSD. And I started telling him the story. And I said, yeah, I got this vet in my program, and here's what happened. And, she's actually telling me that, we've cured her PTSD. And he looked me straight in the eye and he goes, well, you know what? Maybe you have. And I'm like, what? And he goes, seriously, if you're reducing those symptoms and you're bringing that person back into the world around her and not the world that she used to be, in a way, you are curing her PTSD. Now, I know if this goes out into the realm of medicine, we'll get some people that will say, nah, you can't cure PTSD. But again, the point of my book is to relay these personal stories, back them up by research and perhaps other clinical information, and just tell the story. You might not be able to say from a clinical perspective, an ad hoc or treatable or whatever, that PTSD can be cured, but you certainly can make the case that for this one individual Marine, the environment that we created, the people that helped her integrate back into the society, were really significant factors in maybe cure is too strong a word, but vastly improve her PTSD condition.
Well, and it's in the mind of the beholder. Sometimes that's the best part. So that's going to be really good. So we can jump into the solutions. But I just want to remind everybody, we're talking to Jaime Parent. He has written the book Moving Past PTSD: Consciousness, Understanding, and Appreciation for Military Veterans and Their Families. It's being published by Rowman and Littlefield Publishing. You can get the book on Amazon or any major bookstore. Okay, since you're talking about how the treatment's going there, talk about the solutions of how everyone can actually offer to help a vet. You've got 5 solutions. Can you go through them kind of quickly?
I think the first thing, John, that's important is just to listen to the veteran. Don't necessarily try to fix them. That fix has to come from the inside. They have to have some self-realization there, and it's going to be a long, slow process. So just don't expect the man or woman that left their hometown to go fight in a war to come back and be the same.
Mm-hmm.
Be patient with them and work with them and go slowly, because they're struggling externally and internally. And slow is the best way to go, with love and care and understanding. Second thing I would say is find ways for those veterans to continue to serve. I mean, it's really no surprise that veterans do well in such professions as teaching, continuing in healthcare like a nurse or a doctor, police officer, firefighter. You have to remember that a lot of these military personnel have been through certain situations where at a very young age, they've been given a huge amount of responsibility. They've been in charge of many, many people, perhaps millions of dollars of equipment, and they've learned through experience that a lot of responsibility has hit them at a very early age, and a lot of that patriotic service and the continue to serve is ingrained with them. So they want to continue to do good things. They're struggling to find another way to continue the service that they had outside of the military. And because the military model is so different than the civilian model, it's a bit of a struggle for them. It's not an easy segue to make.
Mm-hmm.
But just remember that they have that strong desire to serve, and see if you can match something that continues that strong desire that they have. The third thing I would say is understand that if a veteran has PTSD, the whole family has PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
The circle of friends are affected by that person with PTSD. And what the VA cannot do, unfortunately, is the VA cannot really treat family members. This is really prohibited by federal law. So what the Road Home program does, and what other organizations have figured out, is that family is so important in the recovery, if you will, of the military veteran with PTSD. And it's unfortunate that the VA cannot do this, but the military family, the veteran family, when they come home, they have to be involved in the recovery process. And as we spoke earlier, lots of times the military member doesn't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But perhaps through therapy, through group therapy, and including the family during those therapy sessions, the Road Home program has found that this is very, very effective in helping the veterans recover. The fourth thing I would say is that there's other types of conditions that affect veterans that are just not PTSD. It could be traumatic brain injury and military sexual trauma, just to name a few. These types of conditions also require the same type of therapy approach, the same type of recovery that PTSD does. So it's not just someone suffering from those kind of emotional things related to PTSD. A lot of military veterans have things like TBI and military sexual trauma going on that also need to be addressed. The last thing I would say is we really need to stop the divisiveness that arises from other types of social things going on. Things like racial tension, gender identity, religious differences. These are all prevalent in the military population as well. And none of these national issues come about, however, when you're on the battlefield, you're getting
Mm-hmm.
shot at, you're getting bombed at. You look to the person to the left or the right of you. They don't really care if you're Jewish, if you're Catholic, if you're lesbian, if you're gay, or arms. You're a war fighter in arms, and it doesn't matter what your personal beliefs are. When your life is on the line, you rely on that person to take care of you, and you take care of that person. It's unfortunate that we have these social issues that come crushing on people when they come home, but they do exist in the military. Now, interestingly enough, I would speak to some military people of color, and they would say, "Yeah, racism is alive and well." And then I spoke to another woman who was African American, and she said, "You know what, Jamie? I hear all about this stuff about racism stuff. I didn't see it in the military. I didn't see any of it. I was overseas for 6 years. I didn't see any of this stuff." And she said, and when I came back home, people would come to me and like, "Hey, how'd you deal with racism in the military?" And she said, "What? I I didn't see any of that." And like, "Come on, you're kidding." It's like, no, I didn't see any of that. So there's pockets of equality, which is really a good thing. I was really encouraged to hear something like that. But then again, if you just listen to the media, it's like, well, everything is bad. This is happening all over the place, and really, it's not. That was encouraging for me. And again, something that I never would have guessed. That if you listen to the media, you kind of get this general consensus that all these things are happening, when in fact, it may not be happening. It may be, equality may be there. You just don't hear about it. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book, to expose people to the fact that it's not all bad. It's not everything that you hear, and there are some very, very good stories of equality in the military today.
Is it safe to say that it's a certain kind of strong right Christian ideology that's pushing it, especially among our lawmakers, that's really causing, in addition to the media picking up on that's where a lot of that is coming from?
I would say yes, but then I would also be quick to add that it's really nothing new. And I'll tell you why I think that way. I have a 32-year-old son with autism, and his name is Brian. He does very well. He's won some awards. He was on the wrestling team. He's a really good guy. And I think, John, that's where the roots of my altruistic approach to life is. Because Brian has had autism from birth and still has autism today, and he'll have autism for the rest of his life. And I'll tell you this brief little story, which kind of gives you my view of bias and prejudice. We were at a mall in Columbia, Maryland one day, and we're walking in the mall, and all of a sudden we hear to the left, "Yo, Brian, how you doing?" And Brian turns over and he runs over and he says, "Hi, Giuseppe. Hi, Nathan. Hi, blah, blah, blah." And if you looked at these guys, your immediate bias would be, these are some bad dudes, okay? It's kind of like the Chris Rock thing. He says, "I don't care what color you are. If you're wearing a hoodie and it's 90 degrees out, I'm crossing the street." That kind of thing. And they are just having a great time. And Brian and high-fiving and all that stuff. And then Brian comes back, and then of course I'm puzzled, and I turn to my wife, who's the ultimate source of wisdom with these kinds of things. She's a special ed teacher and behavioral specialist, and I'm like, "So Tracy, what just happened here?" I said, "What? Why are these guys so accepting of Brian and vice versa?" And she goes, "Well, that's easy." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "Well, these young men know what it's like to be disrespected for no reason at all.
Wow.
They know what it's like for someone to look at them and say, 'You're different. You're not good enough. I'm not going to associate with you.'" And so when they come across someone like Brian, there's an instant bond there. And they know that Brian is feeling the same exact things that they feel, regardless of his color, and there's a bond between them. And I thought, wow, that's something, that I hadn't really thought of. So my point, John, is that I believe that prejudice has been around forever and is alive and well, and will continue to be. I think the divisiveness in our government is really nothing new. I think that things in Washington have kind of like been stagnant for quite some time. I don't like the divisiveness I hear in Washington these days, but I really don't think it's anything new, and I think it gets magnified because we have tools like the internet and things like that that really just
Hmm.
push them in our face rather than perhaps in earlier years and generations they were restricted to newsprint and other types of not immediate knee-jerk reaction kind of thing that we see on social media today.
Great point. We got a book coming out on that as well. We are talking to Jaime Parent. He has written the book Moving Past PTSD: Consciousness, Understanding, and Appreciation of Military Veterans and Their Families. It is being published by Rowman and Littlefield Publishing. You can get the book on Amazon or any major bookstores. So you gave us the 5 solutions. Um, Talk about the Enable Veteran Internship Program. How do people get involved with that?
Well, that was an idea I had once, as I said, after talking with Dr. Pollock. Um, I developed this program for a 13-week fast track program. And basically, it's different than the other types of job opportunities available. So I think it's great that you've got companies like Walmart who have said no veteran will go, without a job. Coca-Cola, Bank of America, Walgreens, Amazon. These places have come up and said, you know what, we want to help veterans and we want to give veterans jobs. But then going back to my point about the desire to continue to serve, I think there's a disconnect there because mainstream America says, well, we just give a veteran a job and they'll be fine. Well, working in a fast food restaurant, I'm not knocking those jobs because those
Mhm.
jobs are good for some people and military people. But if you've had that high degree of responsibility and accountability that exists in military culture, you really don't want to do those jobs, and you're not going to be happy with those jobs. And of course, an unhappy employee doesn't make for a productive employee.
Mhm.
But mainstream America thinks, yeah, they just need a job. When in fact they don't. They need a meaningful job, just like everybody else. They need a job where they can smile and get up in the morning and feel good about themselves and feel that they're making a contribution either to society or just helping their family get by and raising a family. So we need to understand that continue to. I keep harping on it, but it's a very important theme in the book. We need to find jobs where veterans can continue to serve. So after talking with veterans, I learned that a lot of them can't wait for the generous GI Bill, the 2-year degree or 4-year
Mhm.
degree. I ran into veterans who are homeless, veterans who got out of the military and they've got nothing going on. They can't wait. They need
They need
jobs right
something
away.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, they need jobs right away. And they need jobs in a place where, as I said, they can contribute and feel good about themselves. And so originally the Enable Vet program was a 26-week program. And again, John, I'm saying this again, I learned so much about veterans, which is another reason for writing the book, is to put this knowledge to work everywhere. I developed this 26-week program, 2 days a week, saying, well, these veterans need time to go to the hospital or appointments or go to school. And I quickly learned that no, 26 weeks is too long. They need jobs right now. So I trimmed it to 13 weeks, 4 days a week. And the real difference with this internship is it's not a job, it's an internship. And the purpose of the internship is to create opportunities so that veterans can be successful in the civilian workforce. So it's on-the-job training. And really, that's how veterans learn best because that's how they learned in the military. Yeah, there's books and you got to study to make rank and all that stuff, but veterans learn best, just like everybody else, with on-the-job training. So we gave them hands-on, on-the-job training, working with PCs, setting up networks, imaging stuff, doing backups, setting up printers, all that kind of stuff, all that office automation things that are valuable in the civilian workforce. And then, of course, I was fortunate enough to be in healthcare IT. So if you think about it, John, healthcare is hot, IT is
Mhm.
hot. When you put them together, it's really super hot. And there's a lot of demand for even entry-level IT people. So having that career track, I think, was advantageous in order to get this program started. and to have it be successful. But I found out that it really wasn't enough, and you have to have the whole package in order to make a veteran successful. Let me explain what I mean by that. It's not just enough to do the training, because if you think about it, most military people, they've never done a resume. They've never gone through a job interview. Their job interview consists of, hey, Joe, you're going to Afghanistan next week. Pack your bags, get ready. That's their job interview.
Mm-hmm.
And so veterans don't know all the soft skills needed, the eye contact, the maybe placing the hands on the desk, how to dress properly, how to answer questions. And of course, you only have, I think studies show, like 15 to 17 seconds to make an impression. And after that, you're pretty much done.
Mm-hmm.
So veterans are getting blown out of the water, even if they do have an interview. And they don't understand why. They also don't understand that just because you put your resume on Monster.com or LinkedIn or whatever, and you send it out to 100 people, you're not going to get 100 responses back. It just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work that way, son. That's not the normal these days.
Yeah.
But they're adamant. Well, I've put my resume together. I sent it off to this company, and you know what, Jamie? I never heard anything from them. I really don't think they want to hire veterans. And I'm like, well, no, you're probably the victim of some software screening program that never even got to a human being. So our program also, in the 13 weeks, gives a couple weeks with organizations that are IT recruiters, headhunters, if you will, and they come in and they actually coach the veterans through interviews, and they practice and they give them these soft skills. And then, of course, they help with the resume and building a LinkedIn profile. Veterans don't know what LinkedIn is. They've
Mm-hmm.
never had to use it. And so creating that online presence also is helpful. And it's really a win-win relationship, John, because if the IT recruiter can get this person hireable, then the IT recruiter wins because they get the finder's fee, right? So I've had IT recruiters come to me and say, well, Jamie, I can't do this pro bono. Wow, I got to make money. This is how I make money. I've got to charge 10, 15, 20% for a placement. And I'm like, I hope you make $1 million because the more money you make, the more veterans you're getting hired. So
Yep.
It's skin in the game. And that's part of the collaboration of the skin in the game that the recruiters have. So even though they're doing the pro bono stuff of getting the veterans prepared, they reap the benefits once they get hired.
No, see,
And
that's great. Now, are you looking for recruiters, like IT recruiters? Are you looking for companies that would want to come in and hire them? Well, if people are interested, how would they get in touch with you? Obviously, they need to pick up your book, but is there a way for them to get in touch with you about this if they're interested?
Yes, and they can go to the Enabled website, which is en-abledvet.net, and that the whole program is out there, as well as personal testimonials from the veterans themselves. And yes, they can contact me personally. info@movingpastptsd.net. That's my author website. I'm continuing to work on the Enabled Vet website as well. So the purpose of me writing the book, at least initially, and then moving to PTSD, was in the appendix. I provide a complete how-to guide of how to reproduce this program for your organization. Obviously, because I was the chief information officer, I picked IT and healthcare IT. But if you think about it, any organization that wants to use veterans as staff augmentation for PC support or call center, etc., can use this model. Actually, if you want to expand it to other professions like perhaps security or maybe food and nutrition, because there's a lot of dietary stuff in the military, police, etc., it's not so much the type of career, it's the methodology of creating the environment where the veteran will be successful, combining those that want to help veterans be successful, working on the resume building and the interview skills, and providing that complete package for the military veteran. The other thing that's unique about the program, John, is that most of the companies that we've discussed earlier, Amazon, etc., Walmart, they concentrate on hiring military veterans, which is good, but they don't think about other people in the military veterans family. So example, let's just say GI Joe has been hurt for a while, maybe a physical injury and needs 4 to 6 months of rehab. And in fact, he can't work or she can't work, whatever. Why not hire the family member of that military person? Because the reality is somebody's got to put food on the table. And studies show that if a person in recovery, whether they're military or not, if they don't have to worry about the basic necessities of life, their recovery rate is dramatically improved. And so why not consider hiring, instead of just hiring military veterans, which is a good thing, hire that spouse. Hire that 18-year-old or older kid that's out of work, but put them in the program knowing that you're helping the military veteran indirectly. And John, nobody I found is really thinking about this. And it's because it's a basic lack of understanding of that very tight military unit. And if that military member is going through long weeks or months of recovery, so is the rest of the family. And you just simply can't rely on the VA benefits to be able to provide enough to sustain that family.
Wow.
So America needs to think about hiring those within the military sphere, whether it's a family member, significant partner, whatever, anybody that can contribute to the health and well-being and the financial stability of that veteran needs to be considered in terms of hiring somebody to make the military veteran's life as best as it can be.
That's another great suggestion. And just before we wrap this up, Jaime, you talked about how employers can help, how different people can help. How about the individual who meets a vet? And I kind of want you to go back a little bit to the woman vet who said, when I meet somebody, they go, oh, did you kill anybody over there? Or, did you get groped? Or was there, sexual harassment in there? How does the person who, and I deal with this a lot because I play in celebrity golf events, and I'm usually at events for Hope for the Warriors and different organizations like that. And to me, your advice on just sit there and listen. And should you, when you meet somebody, is don't go into their military combat experiences. That's not what you should do. Is that a good suggestion?
I have a very quick down and dirty suggestion that I think is very, very effective and very powerful. And it does vary by person, by veteran. So it's not a one fits all, but it certainly is a different approach. A lot of military veterans, John, are really sick and tired of the thank you for your service. Now, I know it's done with great sincerity, with compassion, and with the willingness to say thank you. But for many veterans, it's been overused. And I've had veterans, obviously, maybe they're a little bit irritated, but they say, you know what, if I hear one more thank you for your service, I'm going to explode.
Mm-hmm.
The better term to use is never forget. So if you meet somebody and you shake their hand and you want to thank them for the military service, say, wow, John, great to meet you. Never forget. That kind of sends a signal to the veteran that, yeah, that's what I would rather hear, rather than thank you for your service. And then another interesting one, and I haven't tried this myself, but a couple of Vietnam vets said, I don't want to hear thank you for your service. What I want to hear is, welcome home. And I'm like, wow, why? And the vet said, because you know what? When I came back from Vietnam, nobody welcomed me home. When I hear a welcome home, I feel really good. And of course, that's going to be specific to the Vietnam vet. But I would ask your listeners to, hey, try that out one time. If you meet somebody from Vietnam, a Vietnam vet, just say, wow, great to meet you. Welcome home. And see the kind of reaction you get. I bet you'll be very, very surprised. So, John, just basically in a nutshell, those couple of things can mean a lot when you're making that first impression and they're making their first impression of you when you meet a military veteran.
Wow. Great suggestions. Very, very good. Again, the book is called Moving Past PTSD, Consciousness, Understanding, and Appreciation for Military Veterans and Their Families. It's published by Rowman and Littlefield Publishing. You can get it on Amazon or any major bookstore. The author is Jaime Parent. Jaime is a longtime friend of mine. We went to high school together and junior high together. And Jaime, this has been great. This is I can't tell you how much this is helpful to me, because when I deal with vets, I feel I got an even better perspective, even though I felt I was very comfortable with them, but it just gives me even more perspective. And I think just everybody out there can look at these solutions, and they can also, try to help that veteran. There are veterans in our lives that we're going to run into. So this was great. Jaime, I appreciate it. Thank you. Good luck on the book. I'll have you back on. We'll talk more, and we'll also we'll spread the good news about everything you're talking about as well.
Terrific. Thank you so much, John.
All right. And folks, thanks for listening in. You can help a vet. So hopefully we've given you ways to do that. And thanks for tuning in. Remember, stay informed, not inflamed.
For more on John Daly, go to informednotinflamed.com.